Joining me now with the latest, the spokesperson for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Tal Heinrich. Tal Heinrich, we've had few things to really smile about, I think, over these last number of months. Finally, some good news for some of those hostage families. What can you tell us about the operation that led to this daring rescue?
Finally, indeed, Tom, it's a blessed Shabbat. It's a good day in Israel, and we didn't have many moments in which we could rejoice as a nation since October 7th. Today is such a day, and I can tell you that everyone in my country is so filled with emotion. It's really incredible. A successful rescue operation. I will just say that in the last moment, unfortunately, we heard that one of the special forces police officers who were part of this rescue operation was announced dead. He succumbed to his wounds at the hospital. So it's always bittersweet. We are a nation that's committed to the principle of leaving nobody behind. And once our forces had intelligence about the precise whereabouts of these 4 hostages in the central Gaza Strip, they were being held in the Nuseirat area. That's a neighborhood in the middle of a bustling market scene. This is exactly what Hamas does. They try to shield themselves. They put the hostages inside civilian structures in bustling civilian areas. Our forces received the green light for the special mission. It was a joint operation carried out by special IDF forces, special police forces, naval forces, and Air Force. And they were being held, as you said, in 2 different structures in the area. Noah Argamani, who became a symbol, I think, for the plight of Israeli hostages, because the moment of her capturing by these Hamas terror monsters were documented. And she was being held in a separate structure than the 3 men who were rescued, Shlomi, Ziv, Almog. And our forces located them under heavy fire in broad daylight at around 11 a.m. local time, and they rescued them. They transferred them to the rescue helicopters. They arrived at the Sheba Medical Center in central Israel, where they're currently reuniting with their families as we speak, Tom.
It is absolutely amazing. We have some newly released footage of Noah Argamani being reunited with her father in Gaza. Has the Prime Minister commented yet on this developing story, and what can you tell us from his vantage point of how he is reacting today?
So the Prime Minister has followed the operation, of course, from the beginning to end, and he rejoiced like every Israeli. He spoke on the phone to Noah Argamani, I think about an hour and a half ago. And she told him, I didn't speak Hebrew for such a long time, which is really a remarkable sentence when you think about it. She was being held captive in Gaza for nearly 250 days. By the way, she and all other 3 hostages, they were abducted from the Nova Music Festival in Re'im, and she was abducted alongside her boyfriend, Avinatan, who is still being held in Gaza with the other remaining 120 hostages, who all must come back home. And as far as I know, the Prime Minister will also meet with the hostages that were just rescued. He will make his way to the hospital to meet with them.
Tal, this was a daring rescue, as you pointed out. One of the security forces has lost his life, but the Hamas fighters that remain really fought hard to try to keep these hostages. But this was obviously done with surgical precision, with significant intelligence. Do you feel that this cuts against claims that the Israeli military is being reckless in the way that it is prosecuting this war? That's criticism we are largely hearing from Democrats here in the United States.
The Israeli military, our forces, were not being reckless. Every time when we carry out an operation, it's always surgical. I can talk to you about 2 other incidents that we've had, 2 other operations, one in central Gaza and one in northern Gaza, just in the past, few days, this is we've had two different locations where Hamas terrorists were gathering inside United Nations schools, UNRWA schools, operating from specific one container in one location and three different classrooms of a school. So every time when we plan such an operation, we use precise munitions, we're guided by intelligence, we conduct aerial surveillance to make sure that we mitigate harm to uninvolved civilians. This is what we want to minimize. And as you know, Hamas, they're trying to do exactly the opposite. They want to maximize civilian suffering and civilian casualties in Gaza. They intentionally hide hostages in civilian structures and in civilian areas. And these are the areas from which they operate because they hope that the international community will put pressure on Israel for their bloodthirsty, vile actions against our people and their own people when they commit this double war crime, so to say. So they target our children, then go hide behind their own.
Tal, how does a positive development like this impact the overall strategy being employed by Israel in its fight against terrorists?
So we want to bring home all 120 remaining hostages. Around 40 of them, unfortunately, time has run up from them. They're no longer alive, but we will bring all of them home. The ones who are alive and the ones who should receive proper burial in Israel. Our war objectives since October 7th haven't changed. We will destroy Hamas and bring back the hostages home, and we'll make sure that Gaza will never pose a terror threat to us again. Tom, I think people have to remember that right after the October 7th massacre, we said from the very beginning that we're not in this to degrade Hamas or deter Hamas or contain Hamas. We want to make sure that by the end of this war, they will not have the military capabilities, the desire, or the ability to hurt us ever again. And I'm not just talking about anything on the scale and brutality of October 7th. We don't want to see one more missile, one more attack, one more infiltration attempt through the border. That's over.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been very clear about the point that you just made, but he continues to receive substantial pressure from the Biden administration to agree to some sort of ceasefire arrangement or some political arrangement for the future of Gaza before the war is won. Why do you believe you are continuing to feel that level of pressure when there is so much work left to be done, when there are so many hostages that remain in Hamas captivity?
So we're putting pressure on Hamas both diplomatically through international mediators and militarily to try to yield another framework that will see the release of the remaining hostages. You know that we had one back in November, and that's exactly what worked, the combination of heavy military pressure and the diplomatic avenue. But as President Biden just said in a recent Times interview, he said that Israel has put on the table very generous offers for a hostage release deal, and all of them were so far, unfortunately, rejected by Hamas because they weren't serious about the negotiations recently. And but the claims that Israel has agreed to the notion of a permanent ceasefire before all of our objectives are reached in this war, as I stated, bringing all of the hostages back home and dismantling Hamas, that's incorrect. It's simply excuse me, it is simply incorrect. This war will not end with Hamas in power, Tom.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, look, we're going to have to leave it there, but certainly, as you started saying, a wonderful Shabbat celebration for those families and really for all of Israel with this daring rescue of 4 hostages by the IDF. And our thoughts go out to those who have lost their lives in that operation as well. The spokesperson for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Tal Heinrich, thank you so much. Always appreciate you.